share with us maybe some mistake that you made that was painful at the time, but then enriched you and you learned from?
Sure. I'm happy to share a few. If that would be
a few.
One which I remember quite vividly is when I was in the business role in Palo Alto, we also had to present our monthly results in the business meeting. At those times, these were Cor Boonstra, was the infamous or the famous CEO of Philips at the time. They were called barrel meetings. They were quite, how do you say that, tough business meetings. I, for the first time, then had to present financials of the business. And I had prepared myself really well. So I knew knew it from top left to bottom right, so to speak, right? But what I really did not do well was I really started to explain numbers, and in that sense more showing that I knew the numbers from top left to bottom right, but the audience at the time, which was very, very senior board members of Philips, they didn't need to be convinced whether the CFO or the controller of the business knew details. They assumed that. They wanted to know what is now the story, what's now the managerial message you're going to bring. So I was taken aside after the meeting by the head of the division at the time. He said, "Paul, I need to talk to you." And I basically said, "Don't do it this way, because this way I don't have the time or the bandwidth to listen to all these more detailed things. I really want to know what is it you and your team are going to do, or what you need help, but not show us the details of what was exactly in the bridge between the result from A to B, and I'm not interested." That for me was a real, oh my gosh, I really didn't do that very helpful feedback, obviously. I was actually very happy that he did take the time to coach me and say, this wasn't so good, so that I actually could do a better job next time. That's one I remember vividly. Another one which I may throw out, which is a completely different one, which happened probably more, I think you were even, actually when you and I worked together, because at the time I had a lot of personal challenges in the family with the health situation. And I was trying to manage that family situation while still at that time heading up the internal audit department. And I came to the realization I really can't do that. But I felt very bad because of I always do what I say, I want to do a good job. And at some stage really had to go to the team and I felt very vulnerable at the time. Say, guys, for the next weeks, I probably cannot do it. I need to step down a bit. And you guys need to help me because these and these reasons I can. So really the mistake I made in the period before that I didn't do it earlier, because I waited probably too long doing that. And actually, after I'd done that, actually, there's a fantastic learning, because actually I think it helped in the credibility with the team. The team felt more empowered. You open also more human side, if you want. So actually I thought, hell, I should have done these sort of things much more early in my career. But because I was so focused also myself, wanted to do a good job, very scary to be vulnerable and asking for help. So asking for help for me at times is a very good thing to do.
Yeah, I was there. I remember that. And if I can also share with everybody who's joining the conversation today, that was one big lesson for me as well, right? So the fact that you said, hey, team, I need to be able to rely on you, actually not only helped you get through the very complicated, personal things that you were facing, it was also something that multiplied you. And that to me was a lesson, right? As leaders, and I'd seen it before, but this is not about me, it's about you, right? But the fact that when you ask for help, number one. Number two, if you have a team that is capable, that you can rely upon, then that'll lift you up, that'll multiply you, like I saw happen with you. And it was, to me, a very powerful show of not being afraid to be vulnerable, because I believe that in a good leader, as you develop your career, and I would bet that pretty much everybody who's ever gotten to a very senior level has gone through some period where they realize that humbleness And that vulnerability or ability to be vulnerable is what really allows you to rely on a group of people that you're developing that really pushes you up. So I remember that, and that was in my life too quite a good experience. So thank you for the trust back at the time. I do believe that was a good show of leadership. And the other thing that you mentioned too was this presentation where you were like extra detailed and very, very minutious in how you broke down the bridge from A to B. And I think that that's also something that I wanted to highlight to people in the conversation today, in the audience who are thinking of how to grow my career. How do I get to another level? How do I get promoted? Well, this is an important one. You have to show that your thought process is so clear that you can explain things in a third of the words that you probably think you need to use. And how you learned it, right? And by the way, you made mistakes or you did things that didn't hurt you. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them. I had an old boss, a CEO, who said, listen, mistakes are our payment we all need to make. But if you're going to pay the tuition, you might as well get the education, meaning learn from your mistakes. And I thought what you just shared is an example of that.
And it's the being clear in messaging, actually, because later on in my career, I obviously had talented finance people working for me. And actually, it's a mistake, which I saw a mistake. In fact, it is a mistake, which I've seen more people make, is actually the ability to, and sometimes I've also seen it for people who comes a bit from uncertainty, so they feel a bit uncertain and they want to demonstrate that they know it all. So I've had people working for me who said, you don't have to convince me that you know all the details. I trust you, I believe that. But with that knowledge, what are you going to do? What do you want me to do? So just coaching in how do you a very big amount of data, how do you actually get the clear messages out? That's an important thing.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Other learning or mistake. I have another nice one of you for you. At some stage after I did, when I came back from the US, I did one more business finance role, but then I actually got asked to run a large change program in the finance function. So the global finance function at Philips, which was still very large with multiple divisions and a very not harmonized finance with different IT systems, processes were not exactly running this. The cost of finance for Philips were higher than benchmark, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the CFO at the time, Jan Hommen, wanted to start the program to see how we could get a breakthrough. So the program was kicked off and I was asked to lead that program. It was called, in all humility, Best in Finance. So I could assemble a team, and then the mistake I actually made initially, and I was pointed that it was a mistake, was that I thought at the time that I first needed to get to some content before I actually could go to the top 5, 6 CFOs of all these big sectors or big groups in Philips and tell them what I thought I'd seen, and this is the recommendation, and this is how we should. So I thought that to build a lot of content before actually even reaching out, because I was thinking, well, why would talk to all these top executives if I don't know exactly what I'm going to do? And then obviously that is a mistake, because from a stakeholder management point of view, you actually do want to make sure that you have an ongoing interaction with the key decision makers, because if you want to do a change program in Philips in finance globally, and that involved that jobs were moved, shared service centers, IT systems were shut down, ways of working had to be adopted. That is very, very important. Do this round of people and engaging them in it. So I had a coach at the time pointed me in the right direction and said, Paul, you do it completely wrong. I said, yeah, but what am I going to tell them? I said, that's not relevant. Ask them what their views are and share on how you are going to set it up. So this stakeholder awareness, I think, is and being quite deliberate on that. If you do, for example, something like such a large program, that's where I really made the mistake to not do that immediately. But I got there in the end, and it was very, very useful. One of the interesting things is that there were 5 big businesses in Philips, and all 5 were in violent agreement with me that we had to standardize Philips on one IT and one platform. They only had one recommendation: can it please be the ways of working and the platform they used in their division? 5 were different, right? So, but it was very good to at least start to have that engagement and know a little bit how it works. So that when I came with plans later on, that I knew a little bit where everybody was.
I think this.
They reach out to stakeholders initially, just to keep them embraced, get their views, have them talk. It will also make them feel more that it is their program rather than that it has been thrown at them. Those were lessons I learned when I did this change program.
Paul, I think that you were throwing out some pretty valuable gems here. One of them is this whole stakeholder management. What are so this is a big learning, of course, right? Being stakeholder aware and knowing your audience and getting so this is pretty important. And it might have been something that you were not aware at the time, I would guess, but this realization that you're dealing with stakeholders, you have to make them feel it's their program. It's not Paul's program or it's not finance's program. It's their program. Give me a little bit more depth around your view on stakeholders. How did you, what are your views on how learning to navigate your stakeholders can affect your career in a positive way? I mean, other than this example, of course, which is brilliant. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's beside of even for, in this case, it was for a specific program, but I think knowing if you want to achieve a business goal or maybe a career goal, are the people who are influential to get your program, your project, your career from A to B. And I would not shy away to just make appointments or go and see and go and talk to them. So, for example, I've coached also people, even in our time when we were internal audit, where we had a lot of people who are looking for new roles. I had to coach a lot of them and say, okay, where would you like yourself land? Which people might then be influential to get you landed? Do these people know you? No, maybe not. So why don't you set up a conversation or ask a stakeholder whether he wants to mentor you or coach you? Or so a deliberate thinking of, in particular in larger organizations, who are your key people who can actually get you where you want to go, whether it's, again, for your personal career or whether it's the business project or the business you want to, is a very, very important realization.
Absolutely. And so how did you go then from that job? So you came back from the US and you started doing this finance transformation program. How did that lead you to audit? How did you eventually make your way to internal audit? Because I think that you also, at least in my experience, when we met, you were also instrumental in transforming how audit was viewed. And I will share with the audience a personal anecdote with you. Is when we met, and full disclosure, boss Paul was my boss at the time. I was very surprised because I had never been an auditor. I'd been a business finance person through and through, and I had been already CFO of a couple of business units. And I asked you, so why me? I've never been an auditor. And you said, well, because you've never been an auditor, because you've been in business finance and you have never done audit is why you're interested. And so that's the origin of my question. How, when you were in audit, how did you get there? And what shaped your views of, hey, because you're not an auditor, I want you in my team. So what was your...
Well, at some stage, CFO, the then CFO at Philips, I have to say that the head of audit at the time came to me and said, Paul, if you like to come and work for internal audit, I have a very big role. It's the complete lighting and a big chunk of Philips, all the operational and financial audits. You're the guy, I like you, and I want to change. And can you come and help me? And then I said no. And the reason for that actually was over the years, I was audited many, many times. And I thought the extra added value of audit at the time was very, very limited. Very accountant, not always the right people to do an operational audit, just rehashing basically what I heard in the interviews. So I was underwhelmed. So I thought, no, I don't want to be going there. Also, audit at that time was a little bit the ground where people who were not so good in the finance career then ended up in internal audit. So that was a bit the reputation department. So I said no. Then next what happened, I was friendly invited to go to the CFO of Philips, who told me, Paul, I heard you said no. I said, yes, that's correct. And then they want to know my motivation. So I said, it's I not have a high appreciation for this organization. So like my current job, so why would I move? And then he convinced me actually and saying, yeah, but that is exactly the reason why you want to move, because we actually want to change the internal audit to something which is actually adding value, and your hands are free to do whatever you want, and work with the guy who was then just nominated as internal audit, who I then succeeded a couple of years later. And that's how I ended in internal audit. And also is a bit, Eduardo, what I'm earlier is I always pick something where I can learn, because in all honesty, I had not real audit experience by any stretch, right? Side of not like audits I got, but I was not an internal audit expert at all. But I thought, well, hey, and then my initial was to lighting business. I'd never been in the lighting business of Philips. So here I was going to lighting, which the industry I didn't know, and being responsible for audit, and things which are new. That should be fun. Learning again. So and off I went. And then in the year of the department is, and I think over the years, and you have been also instrumental in that, we hired a new team, starting with the top team where you were part in, to really completely change the mindset, the type of people we had in the team, and really completely transformed and rebuilt the reputation of internal audit. It was a hell of a lot of fun as well.
It sure was. And this highlights to me the importance of, regardless of the function, in my own previous life before we met, I also had been offered a job in internal audit, and I also said no. And I believe that when you and I met, I told you that as well. I might have, I forget, it was a long time ago. But the same reasons that you in your argument when you were offered the job and you said no is pretty much what I said too. I've been audited many, many times. It was not a pleasant experience, not because of the fact that you were being audited, as much as because of the focus of the teams that came and audited, and the fact that you took that function, which in its face is normally, or was maybe back then, not always the sexiest of teams, and you were able to build it into this talent factory. It only kind of highlights to me the importance of building the right team and developing the right team and getting the right talent. So could you share some thoughts about your experiences with teams, and how you took this view, even before audit? I'm not sure, but I think this probably is something that's big in your mind as well as you were growing your teams. And how did you manage your teams? What were your thoughts as you were managing people? What did you look for in them?
Well, I think the biggest people management learning experience was actually internal audit, because at the time, I think it was something like 70 people with not per se the right skill set, because basically we do operational audits and we're all accountants. So basically what we started to change, and you're part of that, is actually try to get talented supply chain people or talented marketeers or talented business people into our teams, and have obviously still a core process functionality there, but make sure that the business people or the talent, the different functions could quickly get the right processes and tools to be successful. But they brought the knowledge, and they certainly had completely different conversations with their OPTs, because they spoke the language or they knew about supply chain, rather than an accountant doing an audit on supply chains. Actually was somebody who knows supply chain doing an audit, which was a big difference. But it was not an easy thing, because a lot of the talent, I had to make sure that I could attract the right talent. So we did a lot of branding and marketing of the department. Then obviously we also have to show success stories, that the new talents which we have in our organization, that we could help them and coach them to land successfully and get promoted. Also another, just for the fun of sharing, I also recall, I'm not sure if you were there, but it was really in the early days when we still had quite a conservative old team, and at a meeting which we had to kick off. And then in that meeting, normally you have to picture a big conference room and a stage, and they expected the leadership team of audit to give a presentation or with PowerPoints. And instead, we actually pulled off sketch where we were dressed up. I think one of our teammates was Superman. One of our female leaders was Mega Mindy. I was very called myself the transformations fairy, and actually in a very, very playful, we actually try to get the message across on there's a new wind blowing. And I will never forget the faces in the audience because they were really like, what
Paul,
the hell?
I mean, for those of you who don't know Paul in person, he's almost 2 meters tall. So I just imagining a fairy of that size, that would have been certainly something to remember. I can see that as an exercise. Branding.
Yeah, there is still photo footage on the internet of that, which I hate now. But anyway,
I got to get my hands on one of those, Paul. I'm gonna go look for those. So tell me something. How about your mentors? As you were growing through your career, did you have mentors? How did you choose your mentors, if you did? Or what role did they play in your development?
I've had many. I think I was blessed with also having very good leaders. Philips did have an enormous, rich talent leadership pipeline. I had actually very good leaders for which I could learn from. I've named many examples. So I really looked and picked up, okay, what are these guys doing or these girls doing? What I admire, what can I learn from them? So I have an example of one of our leaders, actually in the later period of my career, I admired a lot. Fantastic people management skills, the way he could actually lead a team, bring consensus, and inspire people. I really looked at him from wow, and tried to pick up things from that. I had another leader who I admired a lot simply because of the speed in which he could process things and then actually take decisions where, from my point of view, I would have preferred to analyze a couple more weeks before I would have had the guts to take a decision. But he took them quite quickly and often, so that actually learned me a lot in the sense, not always analyze, but sometimes go more with your gut and trust that, because you benefit from taking and speeding up an organization. So I can name many examples. So I really used the great leaders around me to get my inspiration on what I saw them do and what I could learn from that myself, Joanna.
Thank you. So yeah, for sure, inspiration, an example. And did you ever have a conversation with any of your mentors where they gave you feedback? Did they say, hey, Paul, this is something you could be doing differently, or this is how you should approach that kind of conversation, other than the person who pulled you aside a little while ago that you told us and said, yeah, you don't need to convince us. What did you have examples where your mentors altered your view, your perspective, your approach to something?
Mentors and feedback. I think the whole idea of feedback for me is, you call that out. I think that's a very, very important thing. And for me, feedback is not something you just get from a formalized, let me nominate a mentor and then he or she is going to give me the wisdom and tell me what to do. I think asking for feedback, and not just on senior people, but also I learned a hell of a lot by asking feedback also from people around me or people working for me, and trying to really, even in our internal audit days, you recall, I made quite a point of that, of actually trying to create that feedback culture where we're very open in giving each other feedback really as a gift for learning, not so much as a criticism, to criticize somebody. So mentors are everywhere in my mind. If you ask for feedback, your mentors are everywhere.
That's a great point. I love that point. So Paul, let me move on and get a little bit more to your personal side. I remember when we were working together that you enjoyed going to live concerts, and you were there quite often, and you've gotten to see some pretty amazing groups and some pretty obscure groups, obscure to me at least, that sometimes you told me, I went and watched whoever. It's like, oh man, this guy really knows his music, because I just had never heard of them, and I love music. So tell us a little bit about your passion for music. How does that play a role in your work-life balance? How do you use that to enrich yourself?
For me, music is a good way to relax and get into a different zone, if you want. So I've always loved to listen to music, but never played an instrument myself per se. Basically going to see people who make music or going to concerts gives me a lot of fun. And we have the blessing of, I live very close by Amsterdam. Amsterdam is a city where there is so much. I think every band in the world basically is visiting Amsterdam, so you got a lot of opportunities to go and see. And at these times, also my daughters are gaining an interest, so I stay for bands which you would definitely not know, and also didn't know basically via my. If I buy the tickets, that's important, then I get along with them. So I sometimes now go to the concerts together with my daughter, risking to end up in the mosh pit if I'm not careful. But it's just a lot. It's just a lot of fun. So I like doing that. And I've also stepped up since year 4 or 5 now, just to try and eventually, way too late, obviously, to try and learn to play an instrument myself. I picked the guitar, which is again something completely different. And from a learning point of view, I enjoy that a lot. I'm not stage ready yet, Eduardo, but it's.
I was going to ask you to play something for the audience. So how did you manage, now that you're talking about music and your affinity for music and interacting with your daughters, with music as a vehicle, and you're picking up the guitar, how did you manage work-life balance as you were growing? Because you had quite the busy career. And even when we worked together, I know that we were busy like mad people. What was your method? How did you find the time to make sure that you had that balance, that personal center?
Yeah, I've always tried to organize it in a way that as much as possible, finish the work before you go home. So that actually when I got home, I felt a bit more relaxed and able to spend time with family. And that worked actually quite well for me for many, many years. But I have to confess, actually, the last years, maybe that's also because of COVID, Eduardo, I feel that in particular also for the new generations and people working now with all the it's even more difficult, because I found the last couple of years work really goes into your home because of meetings going from home. During the international environment, I never minded to work in the evening after dinner and go back to my office and catch up on mails or read whatever it was what is required. The last years I actually struggled, in all honesty, more, because also more filled up with meetings in the evening. So the last couple of years I've not been so good at it. It's actually, to be honest, was also one of the reasons why I decided last year to try and look for something else to do, because I ended my career at Philips last year. And actually, this was one of the reasons of wanting to make change, to see if I could do still something else, not have such a high pressure and high burden for me. But the fact that I wanted to have a better work-life balance at that stage, that also to do with it.
I think that that's such a rich experience to share too, that you have to be self-aware to be able to productively grow, because you don't want to burn out and then fizzle out. You want to be at your peak, and that requires energy management and being focused and knowing how to balance things. So I think that step that you took is another example of you need to be self-aware and you need to know where you are. And that, I think that's something that you've done brilliantly through your career. So Paul, we're at the end of our time. I guess maybe in parting, before I thank you, because I want to do that. Is there any other message that you would like to tell people who are growing their career right now? No nos. So things that you believe are like, this is something you want to stay away from. What are big no-nos? What are big mistakes that you would advise people to not make?
I think it's almost reiterating a bit what came out of our conversation. I think it's important to make sure that you deliver actually and are thorough and work from a content point of view, but that you don't forget around with stakeholders around. No, just making noise for self-promotion, but be much more deliberate to do it actually where it makes business, but it's driven by a business purpose, and then not be too shy about it. I think those would be the things. May also be good, and I think most leaders will, I expect, look at that. So if you and I look to talents for promotion, there's usually 3 things which I look at. And so one is there eagerness to want to do something bigger, or eagerness to learn, or is that actually drive, the ambition? I think that's one very important thing. Then the second thing, obviously, is there already a track record? Can you see that somebody has already delivered something? Being smart or having the education is almost a starting point. So don't even go there. But that's for me because I've used to work all with smart people, but it's really the drive is that as people have somebody already read result. And the third one is somebody open and willing to learn and open for feedback. Remember that feedback point we talked about earlier? I have no problem to promote people, even if they make mistakes, because from mistakes you learn. I have a problem with if somebody is not good in a certain area and you give feedback and the person is not coachable or cannot really no-go, right? So really, it's those three elements where I think most leaders will look to talent on which person would you promote. So if you're aware of that as an individual and reflect for yourself on those three things and work on that, I think that will be helpful.
Absolutely. So, my friend, thank you so much for the time and the inspiring conversation. You have so much to share, and I believe that you were quite generous with giving us a little bit of an insight into your career, what drove your growth, and what keeps you going, and what makes you get out of bed in the mornings. And I wish you the best for your career playing, for your guitar playing career. And as soon as I hear that you're playing more, I'm going to have you back and ask you to play something. Thank you so much for your time, Paul.
All right. More than welcome, Eduardo. Take care. Good to see you again.
Same here. Take good care. Good luck, everybody. Thank you for joining. And I hope you enjoyed this wonderful conversation. I'll see you soon.
All right.